Maybe you don't have high standards. Maybe you're just tired. Tired of pretending conversations matter. Tired of laughing at jokes that aren't funny. Tired of feeling alone in rooms full of people. So you stopped trying. And now you tell yourself you just prefer being alone. But here's the uncomfortable question. Did you choose solitude? Or did you slowly decide people aren't worth the risk? That tension sits quietly under everything. You get invited somewhere. You stare at the message longer than necessary. You imagine the small talk, the surface updates, the subtle competition. You already feel drained, and you haven't even left your house. So you say you're busy. Again. You don't hate people. You just don't want to perform. And over time, the invitations stop. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain learned that connection costs energy. Not just social energy, emotional exposure. When you've been misunderstood, betrayed, or quietly excluded, your nervous system adapts. It starts scanning for signals, inconsistency, hidden motives, micro-rejections. You notice everything. That awareness feels like strength, but it also makes every interaction heavier. So your brain makes a calculation. Is this person worth the emotional investment? If the answer isn't clearly yes, you conserve, you withdraw. Not because you're antisocial, but because your system prioritizes safety over possibility. And the more you do this, the more your identity shifts. You stop thinking, I haven't met the right people yet, and start thinking, I'm just not like most people. That's the pivot. But here's where it gets complicated. Discernment and defense look identical from the outside, and sometimes from the inside too. You tell yourself you value depth, and you probably do. But depth requires something uncomfortable, staying long enough to move past surface level. Most conversations start shallow. That's not fake. That's gradual trust building. If you leave before the depth can happen, you never actually test your belief. You just reinforce it. Over time, your standards rise, not because people got worse, but because your tolerance for uncertainty dropped. There's a hidden cost to being the independent one. You become impressive, self-contained, low maintenance, unbothered, but also unreadable. When you don't need anyone, people stop trying to reach you. Not because you're intimidating, because you seem closed. And here's the psychological trap. The more alone you are, the more you normalize it. The more you normalize it, the harder vulnerability feels, until solitude stops being a choice and becomes your default identity. I'm just someone who walks alone. That sentence feels powerful, but it can quietly turn into a wall. At first, it's behavioral. You skip events, you filter people, you conserve energy. Then it becomes identity. I'm different. I think deeper. I don't need people. Eventually, it becomes existential. If no one truly understands me, maybe connection isn't real. That's the dangerous thought. Because now you're not just protecting yourself from disappointment, you're protecting yourself from hope. And hope is risky. So here's the sharper distinction. Are you alone because you don't need people, or because needing people feels unsafe? This is the shift. Stop asking, Are they worth my energy? Start asking, am I willing to tolerate imperfection long enough to discover depth? Connection is inefficient, awkward at first, messy, slow. If you require immediate resonance, you will mistake gradual warmth for incompatibility. High standards aren't the problem. Impatience with vulnerability is. You don't have to lower your standards, but you might need to raise your tolerance for uncertainty. That's different. One is about them. The other is about your nervous system. Remember the question from the beginning? Did you choose solitude or decide people weren't worth the risk? Maybe the answer isn't one or the other. Maybe you chose safety and called it preference. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you adaptive. But adaptation isn't destiny. You can keep your depth, keep your standards, and still experiment with letting conversations unfold past the first layer. Not everyone deserves access to you, but someone might deserve a second conversation. And if that idea makes you slightly uncomfortable, that discomfort might not be weakness. It might be the doorway. Because the real question isn't why you're alone. It's whether your independence is strength or armor. And that difference changes everything.